You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us. Hi, I'm Annie from the US.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted by two online friends who still never met in real life.
It's a whole thing. I hope you all had a great Halloween. Spooky fuckery month is over, and we are back with less spooky and more earthly cases. Mostly. But before we start, we would like to give a huge shout out to all of our Patreon members. Thank you. If it were not for you, there is no way we would still be doing this show. We really appreciate you. We will be holding our next live get-together on the 11th of November, which is Veterans Day in the US. And that episode is actually going to be more of an informal, personal, just chatting with all of y'all. So we are looking forward to that. And also, during that get-together on the 11th, we will draw a winner for the October 2024 giveaway, same as we did for the listener stories. So everyone who is a current patron is going to be in that pool automatically, and one of you will be receiving a little package of goodies from Austria.
My house at the moment is stuffed with Austrian sweets and chocolates, which is very tempting, but I already have everything here. I just have to send it out, and I wanted to wait until we draw the Patreon winner as well.
Amazing. It's going to be good. So for more info, listen to the end. We might talk more about it then, or check in on Patreon if you have any questions, because right now it is time for this week's topic. And this week's topic is...
Okay, so I know Annie does the same thing I do, which is whenever I see an article about something, anything, a case, a historical event I find interesting, a mystery, I always take a screenshot and then I place it in a folder for future episode ideas.
Yeah, if something ever happens to me, I really need Paul to handle my phone, or I'm going to look like a sincere sociopath. When I think we all know I'm probably not a sociopath. I feel like I cry way too much to be a sociopath, but he said to me the other day, I need to clear space for my cloud for storage. And he's like, why do you have so many screenshots? And I was like, don't talk to me about it.
Stop it. I just did the same. I just deleted 240 videos and I don't know how many screenshots and cleared up 40 gigabytes.
Yeah, I have to do it. It's going to take me
shared iCloud.
Yeah, the entire day. I have to basically block off a day to just delete.
Yep.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, so over the years, as you hear, we both collected a lot of screenshots and articles. And some of these have been turned into episodes already. Others will be at one point. But very often, these cases don't provide enough information for a standalone episode. Which doesn't mean that the stories are not worth being told, especially when it comes to missing persons cases. We all know the more these often decades-old cold cases are talked about, and the more people hear about them, the higher are the chances that someone might remember something. And these families might be able to find some answers.
Yeah, that's right. I think not knowing, we've talked about this so often, but, I think we both agree that not knowing is by far the worst thing we can imagine. So this week we want to tell you about a couple of disappearances, a few. And we really want to urge everyone listening, if any of these cases sound familiar to you, if anything rings a bell or triggers a memory, even if you don't think it's necessarily related or important, please contact the authorities.
There are several ways to do that. Just Google it because, we're an international podcast. I think the easiest way is to contact your local authorities, and I'm sure they can provide you with the information how to contact whoever is working these cases, right?
Yeah, that's right. And whenever we have direct information to share with you, we'll give you that information as well.
Yeah.
So the fact is that people go missing every day all over the world. And in the United States, Approximately 600,000 people are reported missing every year. And that is a huge number, but there is some good news. The vast majority are found within days or even hours. In fact, over 90% of missing persons cases in the United States are resolved within a week. Most are cases where people simply lose contact or temporarily go missing for personal reasons, and they're eventually located safe. However, that still leaves tens of thousands who remain missing for months, years, or even decades. And out of those reported missing, about 1% are never found, which means around 6,000 people remain missing long-term every year in the United States alone. In Europe, the numbers are similar, although it varies by country. The UK, for example, sees around 180,000 missing persons cases a year, and again, most are found within a short period. Countries like Germany, France, and Italy report tens of thousands of missing persons cases each year as well. Across Europe, the estimate is that over 250,000 people are reported missing annually, and while the vast majority, as we said, are located, there are still so many who vanish long-term. Worldwide, the figures are staggering. The International Commission on Missing Persons estimates that there are approximately 1 million people reported missing globally each year. But keep in mind, this number is an estimate since some countries don't have centralized databases or even report these kind of numbers openly. Some are lost in conflict zones, disasters, or remote areas, making them very hard to track.
And how long do these cases stay open? So for the majority of missing persons cases, as Annie said, it's a matter of days. But if a person isn't found within the first year, the chances of solving the case drop significantly. Cases that go unsolved for decades are actually quite rare. They do exist, however. Occasionally, with the advances in technology like the DNA testing or new witness testimony, cases are solved years or even decades later. Remains are discovered and identified after decades, providing closure for families who have been searching for answers for most of their lives.
Yeah, and it's just happened recently, hasn't it, with the Lady of the Dunes, Ruth Marie Terry, or the boy in the box, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. So
also, there are still chances that people can be found alive after decades. Like we talked about Natasha Kampusch, that was 8 years. J.C. Dugard, how long was she missing?
Oh my goodness. Too many years.
I think it must have been more than 10 years,
Yeah, I think it
right?
was. I think it was quite a few more.
What about the odds of being found? Well, thankfully, they are pretty high for recent cases. Within the first 48 hours, the chances of finding someone are obviously greatest. Beyond the first week, as I said, the search becomes more complex. And after the first year, the case usually becomes a cold case. Now, that doesn't mean there's no hope. There's always hope. As these two cases Annie just mentioned show, or the cases I mentioned, even after decades, cases can be solved.
The first case that we want to share with you is the disappearance of Christopher Matthew Kerze. And for that, we're going to take you back to April 20th, 1990, to the Minnesota town of Eagan, where 17-year-old Christopher Kerze seemingly vanished into thin air. Christopher was a high school junior, known for being intelligent, a bit introverted, but had a great sense of humor, and he was responsible. He had a close circle of friends, loved books, was a talented clarinet player, and also on the varsity swim team, which is impressive because it's hard to do a music skill in high school and also play a sport because it's hard to juggle.
It takes a lot of time,
Yeah,
right?
It's a lot of time. On that day in April, Christopher told his mother that he wasn't feeling well and he was going to stay home from school. And he was not the kind of kid who would skip school, like fake being sick to get out of school. So his mom was like, yeah, absolutely. His mom's name is Lonnie, and she took his word for it that he wasn't feeling well and decided that she would go into work. His dad at the time, I think, was away on business. And his mom did offer to stay home, but he said he just had a really bad headache. And he was like, don't worry, I'm going to be fine, which I do this to Paul all the time. Like, I'm not well enough to do the thing that you're going to go do, but you don't need to stay here with me. Like, you go do your thing. There's nothing you can do to help me. I'm just going to take meds and try to sleep this off. And so that made sense to her. She gave him some pain medicine, probably some like Tylenol or Advil, and didn't think anything of it. She said goodbye to her son, and she left for work, not having any idea that that was the last time she would see him. Because when Lonnie returned home later that day, her son was gone. And so was the family van, a blue 1988 Dodge Caravan. Oh my gosh, my same childhood car. Lonnie found a note in the kitchen from Christopher, and it read, quote, "Mom, something important came up. Feeling somewhat better. Back by 6. Unless I get lost. Love, Chris." Quote. And Chris had underlined the word lost twice, which his mom thought was kind of unusual. But Lonnie dismissed it as a joke about his occasional difficulty with directions. The only thing that was a bit odd that really, I think, bothered his mother was the fact that the family dog, Bowser, was running around the yard. And normally, he wouldn't be out off-leash. He would always be on a leash or under control. So it's very, very weird for her to come home and find the dog running all over the place and then Christopher and the car both gone. The hours pass and Lonnie starts to really get worried. And so she calls her husband, Jim, and he comes home and they go to the police and they file a missing persons report. But they're told that they have to wait a full 24 hours before they can file a report. And so that is what they did. The day after Christopher had disappeared, this very disheartening letter arrives, and it had been sent from Duluth, which is roughly 2 hours away. Christopher had written that he'd faked being sick in order to get access to the van, and he spoke of an intention to take his own life, writing, quote, "If just one person is better off for having known me, my life will not have been wasted," end quote. This is heartbreaking. Lonnie and Jim stated that the handwriting in the letter resembled Christopher's handwriting. In the days that followed, the family van was found abandoned near George Washington State Forest in northern Minnesota. Inside, Christopher had left the van keys and a note identifying it as belonging to his family. There were no further clues, except it appeared as if Christopher had taken $200 out of his savings account, and that Jim's O.F. Mossberg & Sons 20-gauge shotgun was missing. What's interesting to note, though, is that Jim stored the ammunition for the shotgun someplace else, and not a single shell was missing.
Can I ask you, back in 1990, how easy would have been for Christopher, an 18-year-old in Minnesota, to buy the ammunition? Would it have been possible, or...?
He was 18.
17.
That I'm honestly not sure about. I would imagine that an 18-year-old could probably buy ammunition for a shotgun because, and I could be completely wrong about this, but I would imagine that Minnesota's good hunting, and I would imagine that there is a lot of hunting done in Minnesota, so I'm going to say not incredibly difficult, I don't think.
But yeah, I'm sorry, he was 17. Maybe it would have been harder.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have, to be honest, in the 90s, depending on how rural an area he lived in, or... I'm not sure, to be honest. So yeah, he had the gun. I also wonder, like, is there any chance there was one in the chamber? I don't know. The police launched a search, but no trace of Christopher was found, and shortly after his disappearance, this is the part I really dislike, a series of strange calls started coming into the Kerze family's phone. Not just the Kerzes were receiving these phone calls, but also one of Christopher's neighborhood friends. And in the background, they could hear noise, almost like the person was at a party. Each time when they would try to speak or ask who it was, the caller would hang up. After 6 months, the calls stopped just as abruptly as they had started. See, that, to me, I feel like has to be Christopher.
Right. Yeah, if it would have been somebody who... We always know there are people who try to, interject themselves into cases like this. But would somebody just call and not say a word?
Mm-hmm.
And then why would somebody call not only the family, but also the neighborhood friend? Who would know the number?
Right. That's right.
And if it's prank calls, I have the feeling there would be something more than just...
Listening. Just wanting to hear someone's voice.
Yeah,
and
it feels like it, right?
Yeah, and there are a lot of backgrounds that could sound like a party. You could be in a bus station, you could be in an airport, you could be in a bar, you could be so many places. A witness came forward claiming that they had picked up a hitchhiker and that matched the description of Christopher, and they took him to Duluth, but police were never able to confirm this story. Of course, over the years, tips trickled in, but nothing led to Christopher. One lead came from Old Orchard Beach, Maine, where someone claimed they'd spoken to him, though this too was unsubstantiated. In 2004, the Eagan police received an anonymous letter referring to Christopher as a, quote, guardian angel, and advising them to stop searching, saying that he would, quote, come back when he was ready. Police ultimately wrote it off as a hoax, but despite all of this, Christopher's case remains unresolved. His family has held on to hope that he might still be out there somewhere, especially after he was featured in Soul Asylum's music video for Runaway Train in 1993. Do you remember that video?
Yes, oh my god, yeah, I love that song. And I remember that video like yesterday. I always found it so sad.
Mm-hmm.
The photos of the missing kids. I don't know, for all of our younger listeners, way back in 1993, there was this alternative rock song by Soul Asylum called Runaway Train. You might have heard it. It's got that unmistakable 90s vibe. And I don't know, on the surface, it's just a song about feeling lost and struggling to find a way back. You know, typical 90s angsty teenage song. But what's really interesting about it is the video. Instead of only telling a story, Soul Asylum, I guess it was their idea, they decided to spotlight missing children, turning it into a huge public awareness campaign.
Yeah, and the video is unforgettable. As the song plays, photos of real missing kids come up on the screen, one after another, with their names, ages, and when they disappeared. It's like just a real visual reminder that these children weren't just statistics, that these were actual children with families and lives that they were torn away from. And it's hard to watch because we'll link to the video, but you can easily find it on YouTube or anywhere you want to, Runaway Train by Soul Asylum. It's hard to watch because between the actual missing kids are scenes of, child abuse, sex trafficking, the kinds of things that kids run from and run into when they're on the run, if that makes sense. It's just so sad. It's a really, really striking music video. But this is what's really amazing, and this is something good from that video, is that they actually helped to find a bunch of these missing kids. The original version aired all over the United States, but they also made versions for other countries like the UK, Australia, featuring missing children from these regions. People watching the videos started to recognize faces, and eventually 21 kids were found because of this music video. Just imagine that. 21 families got the answers they had been praying for, all because of a music video. That's amazing. Of course, not all the stories ended that way. Some of the kids, like Matthew Kerze, still haven't been found. And it's bittersweet because it shows how much of an impact the video made, but it also reminds us that there are families still waiting, still holding out hope. Today, Christopher would be in his 50s, and from the NCMEC page, we do have an age progression photo. And of course, we're going to post it in our Facebook group and in the According album and on Instagram. And in the absence of any final answers, Christopher's family continues to wait and hope for closure. And they're just really hoping that one day they're going to find out what happened to the boy they loved and lost over 30 years ago. So this case, Johanna, this is one where I think there's a really good chance that he is actually alive out there somewhere. It's so sad because if the worst happened, if he had a mental health crisis and he went into the woods to die by suicide, then at this point, they're going to have to wait for the very small chance that a hunter or a hiker or a dog walker finds some remains. But I really think there are enough strange happenings after Christopher disappeared that could really point to him hopefully being alive It's possible he didn't leave willingly and someone else was involved, but I think it's more likely because of his age that he possibly suffered a psychotic break and took off and is still out there. And I think that is very, very possible. And if that's the case and he is listening to this, I hope that he will call his family or, talk to somebody that you trust, because it's never too late to call your family, His mother has shared messages for him in the media. His mother says, quote, "We have never stopped loving you, never stopped missing you, never stopped praying for you. Come on home." End quote.
I think it's also possible that he had the plan to end his life, but then somehow something happened that kind of deterred him from that path. And what I find so interesting, that someone wrote the anonymous letter in, when was it, 2004? So 14 years after he disappeared, calling him a guardian angel. I think that's interesting.
That is interesting.
It sounds like he helped someone.
He might have helped someone, or he might be having psychological problems and think he's literally a guardian angel.
You think that he could have written the letter himself?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's also a possibility. I can see that. Yeah.
I think it's possible. I hope he did. I hope that for their sake, I hope that he's alive and reaches out. It's just very sad. And it is not going to get happier, y'all. This episode is, yeah.
Next, we have the disappearance of Stephen Clark, a young man who disappeared from Saltburn in 1992. His sister Victoria has spent over 30 years searching for him, and she is still holding on to the hope that one day he'll be found. So Stephen was born on 30th of August 1969 in Colchester, Essex. By the time he was around 2 years old, he and his family had moved to Edinburgh in Scotland, and it was here, in a town called Kirkliston, that Stephen's life took a major turn, because there he was hit by a lorry in a road accident, which left him with very serious injuries. His left arm was severely damaged, and he also suffered from leg injuries that caused him to develop a pronounced limp, and all of this had a lasting impact on his ability to walk. Despite all of this, Stephen's life moved forward. He spent some time at a school in Kimbolton, Cambridgeshire, before his family moved to South Africa in the early 1980s. Stephen then attended school near Johannesburg, where he spent about a decade before returning to the UK in the early 1990s. The family finally settled in Marskey, North Yorkshire, in the summer of 1991. It was there, in Marskey, that Stephen got involved with the Leonard Cheshire Home, also known as Marskey Hall, where he did some work helping people with disabilities. And he later became part of the Rathbone Society in Redcar, which is an organization dedicated to improving employment skills for people with disabilities. There's also videos, we're gonna link to it, like promotional videos where they show the work of the Rathbone Society and the Marskey Hall, where you can see Stephen actually and Stephen talking. So at the time of his disappearance, Stephen had recently won the Apprentice of the Year award, which is a significant accomplishment for someone who had worked so hard to overcome the physical challenges he faced. Okay, so let's talk about the day of his disappearance. On 28th of December 1992, Stephen Clark, who was 23 years old at the time, was last seen at a public restroom in Saltburn after taking a walk along the beach with his mother Doris. The pair had spent the day together, which was a familiar routine for them, but this time something was different, because Stephen never returned from the men's toilet. Doris waited for him, but when he didn't come out, she went home expecting him to find him there. But Stephen wasn't home. He was never seen again. And that's where the mystery begins. First of all, I need to mention that on the day he disappeared, he left behind his wallet, his glasses, and his watch. Everything was left at home. And this raised many questions about what happened to him. In the days and weeks following Stephen's disappearance, a number of potential sightings were reported. These sightings offered some hope that Stephen might be alive, but also raised more questions and also doubts, obviously. So let's take a look at some of the reports. One of the first reported sightings came on Thursday, 14th of January 1993, so more than 2 weeks after he had vanished, when a woman from Saltburn by the Sea came forward. She said that around 5 p.m. she had been looking out of her living room window when she saw a man walking across the road towards Glenside Terrace. The woman believed it was Stephen because she recognized him. She had seen Stephen and his family at a local bowling club where her relatives worked, and she knew Stephen had been reported missing. She described seeing Stephen walking with another man, someone she estimated to be in his 50s or 60s, medium built, bald with grey hair around the sides, and wearing glasses. According to her, Stephen wasn't talking to the man and seemed to be walking fast to keep up with him. However, the police team that investigated the sighting later expressed severe doubts, because the distance between the woman's window and the other side of the road was considerable, and as I said, it was 5 p.m., so it was already dark by the time she saw them. I think it's possible that she could have been mistaken.
Like a My Cousin Vinny situation with how many fingers? The only thing that gives me pause, I would normally say absolutely eyewitness testimony is rubbish, by and large. However, in this case, because he walked with a very distinctive limp and an uneven gait.
True. And she knew him. It's not that she just knew him from the missing persons flyer poster.
1,000%.
She had seen him in person, yeah.
I can think of half a dozen people real quick off the top of my head that I am very close to who, for all manner of different reasons, don't have a quote-unquote normal, regular, healthy walking gait, right? Like they either have a limp, they use a cane, this, that, the other. And the people I am close to, I really feel like I would recognize them just by their walk. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's so-and-so, if I knew them. And he had a very pronounced situation going on because of the accident that he had been in.
And probably more pronounced when he was trying to walk quickly.
Fast, exactly. So it just kind of makes me wonder, if that was taken into consideration when people said that they recognized him, because I do think there is more validity to recognizing someone that has an unusual walk. Is unusual the right word? You know what I mean.
Or could it be that she really didn't see the face because it was already kind of, sunset, and she just saw somebody limping? But if that was in Saltburn, where there was also like a community for people with disabilities.
100%. Yep. Absolutely. She could have seen someone else with a similar gait to his and just assumed it was him because that's the person she knows with that gait. Eyewitness testimony is so
hard.
Problematic.
Horrible, yeah.
Even when you are 1,000% honest and are trying to be helpful and there is no reason for you to be anything but truthful, it's just not reliable.
No. And I know we talked about this and we both said we would be the worst eyewitnesses. The worst. My husband would be relatively good, but still very unreliable because that's just what it is. But he's the kind of person who kind of, takes everything in and looks at everything.
I was going to say, like your husband, he's in the military. My brother, who's a police officer, like they take in stuff that we don't really think about so much. I know this. I'm aware. I see him take stuff in sometimes and can try to work on what he's calculating. And that's fine. There are, like we said, it's why we give more credence to like Air Force pilots who report UFOs. Like, it's not some Joe Schmo on the ground, saying, hey, that's a UFO.
Walking out of a bar.
Right, exactly. It's not like I tripped over my own high heels, plummeted into a ditch, and while looking up with my skirt around my head was like, is that a UFO? That might have happened once in my 20s. Moving on. But I'm just saying that, I just think that I just have so many questions. All three of these cases, this is the 3 young men that we're doing on this episode, and all 3 of these cases are just, what happened?
Another sighting came just a few days earlier on 3rd of January 1993, but I think it was reported later. A man reported seeing Stephen in Redcar. So as I said, that's another beautiful seaside town. I looked at photos, love it. Near the clock roundabout on Wednesday, which was the 30th of December, And this man said that he saw Stephen walking past the Gazette offices heading towards the town center. At the time, the man who witnessed that was in conversation with a friend and didn't manage to catch Stephen's eye. He described Stephen as walking alone, but due to the heavy rain, he was unable to get a clear look at Stephen's face. The closest the eyewitness was to Stephen was about 27 meters or 30 yards, and he later spoke with a detective in February of 1999, confirming his sighting and noting that the man he had seen walked in a very similar way to Stephen. And there you go again, just as you said. He saw somebody, it was raining heavily, and the person was just walking similarly to Stephen. This statement, of course, adds another piece to the mystery, but it also highlights the difficulties in verifying these sightings. Now, the new investigation team has since continued to appeal to the public, asking anyone who may have information about Stephen's whereabouts between Christmas Day, so 25th of December, and the following Monday, 28th of December, 1992, to come forward. So far, the only new potential sighting the team has received involves a person who believes they saw someone resembling Stephen near his home in Marski between 3 and 4 p.m. on December 28th. Since it got dark around 3:45 p.m., this would place the sighting just before that time. However, there's still uncertainty surrounding this claim as well. Another strange twist came in the form of an anonymous letter. On 24th of September 1999, a handwritten letter was sent to Guisborough Police Station claiming to have information about Stephen's disappearance and that Stephen's parents had something to do with it. The letter was taken seriously and detectives followed up on it by visiting Stephen's home, but at that point, not much came of it. And that's pretty much where the story would remain for years. No sign of Stephen, no clues, nothing. But then, in 2020, so nearly 28 years later, everything took kind of a disturbing turn. In September of 2020, Stephen's elderly parents, Charles and Doris Clark, were arrested by Cleveland police on suspicion of their son's murder. At the time, they were 80 and 83 years old. Imagine, after decades of searching for answers, they become now the focus of the investigation. Their home was searched, the garden was dug up, and police didn't stop there. Stephen's sister too was interrogated for hours, all obviously in effort to uncover what happened to Stephen. I read an interview with the sister, and of course for her, and for the parents this was a nightmare. She stated that her parents had always been caring and loving, and she could never believe they were involved in her brother's disappearance. The police had actually arrested her parents based on a re-examination of this anonymous letter that had been sent to the police in 1991. The letter alleged that the family had mistreated Stephen, but the sister is firm that the letter contained false details and should have never been taken seriously. Let me play devil's advocate here real quick. I understand Stephen's sister and how all of this must have been a huge shock for the whole family, but I also understand that the parents were suspects. I'm honestly baffled that it took so long because there are some issues or questions I have with his case, and I guess you feel the same. So Stephen is out for a walk with his mom. He doesn't wear his glasses, doesn't have his wallet with him, and not his watch. Okay, so most photos I saw of Stephen outside of the house, he wasn't wearing his glasses. I often walk around without glasses, so I leave the house without them all the time. I also leave the house without a wallet when I'm going for a walk, so I have no issue with that. But I think it kind of shows that he just didn't up and leave and start a new life somewhere, I would assume.
Right.
Also, apparently he had just started dating a young woman, and she had already introduced him to her parents. And there is no indication that something had happened between the two, not a fight, not a breakup, nothing that would cause him to run away or even end his own life.
Right. There's no motive for him to just vanish that we can think of.
So I think we can assume that he didn't disappear voluntarily. Okay, so now he's out walking with his mom. He needs to use the restroom. His mom then waits outside for him, but he doesn't come out. She waits a little bit longer, but then decides to go home because maybe he just went home. Did she check the bathroom before? I don't know, because there's no mention of her doing that. I don't understand. I understand that she's British and maybe has some reason of etiquette or whatever for not wanting to enter the men's bathroom. But come on, your son with mobility issues went in there and didn't come back out. Wouldn't you check? On the other hand, maybe she did and it just didn't get reported.
I'm guessing she did and it just didn't get reported because otherwise it's just nonsense. And half my family are in the UK and I can't think of a single member of my family who wouldn't duck a head in there, right? I mean, for anyone, if anyone's in the toilet a really long time, the first move after a suitable wait is just, everything okay in there?
Yeah.
You all right?
Yeah, because why would your first thought be, oh, he must have walked home if you're standing outside of the restroom waiting for him? Maybe it's all super innocent behavior and I'm reading too much into it, but it's definitely somewhat curious and I can see why some would find it a little bit suspicious.
Yeah, it's confusing to me too. And it could all just be very, very, very innocent, right? Like, I think it's more likely that she just gave him tons of time because maybe he'd had a bit of iffy fish or something. Or maybe, like, on his way to the men's toilet, he was like, oh, look, they've got newspapers. How about if I pick one of these up for some light office reading? Men. And so I could see her just not really paying attention. She's people watching. Maybe she runs into somebody she knows. So, like, maybe by the time she realized that actually he'd been in there kind of a long time and checked to see if he was in there and he wasn't, maybe then she assumed, well, he must have gone home. But then that doesn't make sense either, because why wouldn't he have just come back to where she was unless she had gone somewhere else? It just doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I can also see there being a completely innocent explanation, like you said, that we just don't have every single detail of. It could be that all these things were done and it's just not in the...
I think another issue is that they didn't find any witness who placed him and his mother at the public restroom. And so I've read a couple of online theories and there are a lot of people who think that this walk never happened.
I see.
That something happened to him, maybe an accident at home, it was covered up, something. And this walk never happened.
Right. So they think like more of a Madeleine McCann situation. Like, we don't know where he is, so the parents must have done it. I think that's a natural feeling, but it's not always. Sometimes there is a creep in the bushes, unfortunately.
And don't get me wrong, being arrested in your 80s and being accused of murdering your son, or at least having something to do with his disappearance, it's horrible.
Especially if they're innocent.
Yeah, exactly. Of course. The impact on the family is devastating. Stephen's sister recalls how she was grilled for hours by detectives asking about her childhood and the relationship between Stephen and their parents. And it wasn't just the interrogation that haunted her, it was the way her parents were treated. They were held in a hotel for 5 days, I think, during the police search. The police set up tents outside their house and they dug up the whole garden with forensic teams. But no evidence was ever found to link them to Stephen's disappearance. And in February 2021, they were cleared of any wrongdoing. And I think also the person who wrote the anonymous letter, the police asked this person to contact them and she came forward and contacted the police. They never released her name or anything, but I think they know who wrote the letter.
Oh, interesting. Still, so much damage done.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephen's sister has made it very clear that she feels the focus should have remained on finding Stephen and not on accusing her parents. She continues to hold out hope that her brother might still be alive, that one day someone will come forward with information that could finally reveal the truth about his disappearance. And yeah, his family is still looking for Stephen, still wondering if he could be out there somewhere, living a life no one ever imagined. Stephen's disappearance has been one of the longest unsolved cases in the UK, with no evidence to suggest foul play, but no evidence to rule it out either. His family is left with more questions than answers. And so the Clark family is asking for anyone with information, no matter how small, how insignificant it might seem, to please come forward. It could be the one piece of the puzzle that's missing that finally brings them to closure, to the closure they've been waiting for. Could he really have, walked out of that restroom without his mom noticing? And then what? Did he accidentally drown? But then I think his body would have been found if that would have been the case, right?
Yeah, and I don't think he was like a flight risk. I don't think he was like a 5-year-old where if you don't watch them every second of the, It just doesn't make sense. This one's a real head scratcher. The only thing that I can think of is there any possible chance he met someone online, like in the early days of AOL?
Some sinister person?
Yeah, I hope not. It's just what happened. What happened? All right. Do we have time for one more?
I think so.
Okay. So this one is about a young man who vanished without a trace in 2002. He was 20 years old, and his name is Christopher Carlton Thompkins. Christopher was born on December 28th, 1981, and he grew up in, I think it's Ellerslie, Georgia. Everyone who knew him talked about his joyful personality, his strong faith. He was described by family and friends as friendly, hardworking, and well-liked. He had been raised in a devout Christian household. Christopher's values and faith were really integral parts of his identity. He lived with his mother, Anne Mackenzie, and they were very close. Family members remember Christopher as respectful and having a very bright outlook. His mother, Anne, and his aunt, Rosalind, often described him as someone who found joy in everyday life and who valued his relationships with his friends and family. He enjoyed socializing, and those who knew him recalled his natural charisma and positive attitude. So he was just a good guy. He was well-liked within the community. Christopher was working as part of a 4-person survey team in 2002. So this job was physically demanding, but apparently he really enjoyed it. His mother, Anne, also had ties to his work environment because she was employed as a babysitter for the owner of the surveying company. Okay. Now, let's get to the day of his disappearance because this is weird and I don't like it. It's January 25th, 2002. It started like any other workday for the 20-year-old young man. He left home around 8 a.m., drove to the surveying company's office, parked his car, and met up with his co-workers before heading to a job site in the woods near County Line Road in Harris County. They worked in a line formation, spaced about 50 feet apart to cover the area. Around 1 p.m., the men returned from their lunch break and resumed their positions. Christopher was, as we said, about 50 feet away from one of the co-workers, who was reportedly having a conversation with him while they worked. But in a matter of seconds, when the co-worker glanced away and then back, Christopher was gone. The co-worker called out to him several times, but there was no response.
So 50 feet, that's like 15 meters?
Yes, I think roughly 15 meters. It's close.
15 meters would be rather close, yeah. If they were able to talk to each other, that makes about sense.
Yeah, talking to somebody with a raised voice probably, but, So, at first the guys are thinking, oh, he probably just had to go pee and stepped away for a minute, right? Like, fine. Especially because all of his tools, all of his belongings were right there where he had been standing seconds ago. But they waited for him to return, and they waited. And after a while, they started to get worried. So the man who had been speaking with him just moments before calls out for him, and again, there's no answer. He searches the area, and soon he gets the other men to join him to start trying to find him. They scour the woods, calling his name, checking the ground, but there was absolutely no sign of Christopher until they found a boot. Just one of his boots, hanging from a barbed wire fence. When they realized they couldn't find any other trace of him, they decided to call 911. However, they were informed they couldn't file a missing persons report yet. They had to wait 24 hours before the police would begin to investigate. The next day, law enforcement finally arrived, and they began their search in the area where Christopher had last been seen.
These 24 hours, I understand why it's necessary because so many people are not really missing, but it's so frustrating for if you want to report somebody who you know is missing and you can't do anything yet.
Yeah, especially this kind of scenario where this is obviously something has happened here. And it gets weirder. So the next day, law enforcement finally arrived and they began their search in the area where Christopher had last been seen. And they were able to find, I'm not actually clear whether they found his entire pair of trousers, like his pants, or if it was like a torn part of pants or something they thought was related to his pants, along with around 12 cents in miscellaneous scattered coins. And that was all they found. His tools were undisturbed. There was no trace of Christopher anywhere. There were no footprints, no sign of a struggle. It was like he had vanished into thin air.
These kind of disappearances are so scary to me. And there are so many like these. 1 minute a person is there, and then with the blink of an eye, they're just gone. They're gone.
Yeah, this is, for me, by far the most disturbing of the three. They're all tragic, and they all really make you think, but this is the one that kind of scares me a little. I don't know why. So let me tell you more. You can decide if you're scared too. So police conducted a thorough search of the area, but after finding no clear evidence of any kind of foul play, the investigation seemed to stall. The only other significant discovery came months later when a local farmer found Christopher's second boot about 900 yards away in a swampy part of his land. 900 yards, I did a lot of numbers for this one. It's like 800 meters, so almost a kilometer or approximately half a mile. Yeah, what we don't have and what I wish we had, and I don't know if we can do more searching, but I'd love to see a map showing like where he disappeared, where the boot was, where the barbed wire area was, where the first boot was, where the second boot was, where the coins were. So the discovery of this second boot, it raises more questions than it answers, right? Because where did Christopher go? Why was this one boot so far? He had walked a half a mile with one boot? Yeah, none of it makes sense. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence, the police began to form a theory. One of the men on the job site, I think it was Christopher's foreman, told the investigators that Christopher had been acting strangely in the days leading up to his disappearance. He suggested that perhaps Christopher had walked off the job site on his own to start a new life.
That makes no sense. Why would he leave his boots if he wants to start a new life? And he was nowhere near his car. I think he had parked his car at the company, and then they drove all together in a company car to the site. I don't buy it.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, it's not the perfect
either.
moment to just disappear and start a new life, I think. It would make things so much harder.
It would. And I just feel like if the guys at work thought something funny was going on, I feel like the people at home would have realized that something funny was going on.
If he was close to his mom, yeah.
Yeah, and his mother, Anne, she knows Christopher. They were very, very close, and they had actually spoken that morning that he went into work. And she did not believe for a second that Christopher would have walked away from everything, his family, his friends, his life. And she denied the claim that he had been acting strangely. She just said that her son was devout, hardworking, outgoing, and she just said everything she knew about him. It just did not make sense. This is not a kid who would disappear. He just wouldn't. It's like me. I would never.
Yeah, but don't you think that all families of people who walk away say he would never walk away?
Of course. And again, he is, in that same age area where he could have had, this is the age where if you're going to develop certain psychological diseases, this is when they are most likely to manifest. And we can't discount that.
I would be interested in what the foreman meant when he said he was acting strangely on the job for a couple of days.
Exactly. I want very specific details. He might have decided he didn't like the guys at work. He might have heard an uncool comment, or just who the hell knows, you know? He had a bit of iffy fish.
Yeah.
Like, there's literally a million reasons why somebody could be acting not themselves for a few days at work, and it doesn't mean that they're planning a new life. It doesn't not, but it doesn't. I mean, it's a pretty big jump to imagine that suddenly someone's just gonna disappear, but it happens.
It happens, definitely.
It does happen. So the police, of course, are stuck because they really have no leads, they have no witnesses, they have no forensic evidence, and they come to their own conclusion. With the absence of any kind of evidence of foul play or any evidence of an animal attack even, they decide that Christopher had simply left of his own accord. People are allowed to do that, and to be fair, they do do that. And sometimes it's a mental health problem and sometimes it's not. Sometimes they just want to go. And that's what the police concluded, that he had just walked away from the job site, hopefully to start a new life somewhere far away. But for his mother, Anne, this is far from the closure that she needs. Her son vanished without a trace, and the police's decision to close the case really, to her, felt like a slap in the face. She couldn't accept that Christopher, someone who was so close and connected to his family, would leave without a word, and she was absolutely convinced that something more sinister had happened that day. With the case closed, the unanswered questions still lingered. What really happened to Christopher Thompkins? Did one of his co-workers know more than they let on? Or had something else, something far darker, occurred that day in the woods? And today, over 2 decades later, the search for Christopher Thompkins remains a haunting mystery. The lack of answers, the half-hearted investigation, and the unexplained disappearance have left this family with nothing but pain and uncertainty. For Anne Mackenzie, the only thing she knows for sure is that she needs to know the truth.
I don't remember, were the co-workers ever official suspects?
They were not, which I think is interesting to say the least. Christopher being last seen by these 3 men on that day, it just seems like the investigation should have scrutinized them a little bit more closely, like these are the people that were around you that day. But as far as we know, police never really suspected the co-workers of any wrongdoing. Also, the identity of the co-workers has never been disclosed, which makes sense if they were never official suspects. Some people think it's nefarious or of interest that one of the men immediately hired a lawyer when Christopher disappeared. And it might seem like a strange move, because why would someone need legal representation so quickly unless they had something to hide?
Yeah, I know that many people think like this. And I mean, I say in general, it's always advised to seek legal counseling. I mean, even if they were not considered official suspects, they were still questioned. And I know this is the kind of thing that makes people appear suspicious in the eyes of many, but to me, not so much. I think it's a smart thing to do.
Totally agree. I think most of our listeners would agree too. I used to think that if you have nothing to hide, then why would you ever bother having an attorney? And now I think it's fine if you have nothing to hide. Be as open and honest as you can be with your attorney and the police. Yeah. Always have an attorney. And there's another thing. Another reason people don't like the connection with the coworkers. A few months after Christopher vanished, one of those 3 coworkers he was with was sentenced to a long prison term for violent crime. Now, we don't know exactly what happened because we still don't have the name of the person that they're talking about. And it could all be a coincidence, but it's kind of an eerie one considering the involvement in a case that has so many answered questions. Like, it would be nice if none of the people that were with your missing child on the day they went missing then went to prison for violence.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I understand,
Yeah, as we said, the police never released the names of any of these 3 men, and I think this lack of transparency has left a lot of people just wondering, what do the police know? And we see this a lot, and we also have to remember that just because the police aren't sharing things with you doesn't mean that they have a bunch of stuff they're hiding from you.
That's true.
And sometimes they do. Sometimes they are legitimately hiding stuff from us, but for very good reason, because they need to keep certain things quiet in order to test the veracity of any future confessions. There are just, not everything is nefarious, but it could be.
I think it's just something that's typical for the true crime community, because we know about so many cases and we always see the worst of the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And we see corrupt police work, shady police in many cases. So whenever these things happen, it's always like the alarm bells ringing. But yeah, as you said, more often than not, it's just they have to keep things under lock.
Exactly.
This is such a puzzling case. Do you want to talk a little bit of the theories about what happened to Christopher?
Yeah. So, of course, one theory is that the 3 coworkers had something to do with it, that there was a fight or they attacked Christopher, and then they made up the story that he had simply vanished. And I guess one of the things I was curious about as well is we don't know. Christopher was a young Black man, and I wish that didn't matter. I wish that wasn't even a question, but it is, obviously, right? And then, of course, there are many people, this is the part I really don't like, who like to bring up the absolutely terrifying missing 411 category because...
Yeah. I didn't want to mention it because this is not a paranormal story today, but it came to my mind immediately as well. Is this some national park area, maybe close by in Georgia there?
I don't know.
It's a wooded area.
I'd have to look it up. But yeah, very quickly, for those of you who don't know, missing 411 refers to a series of mysterious disappearances of people, mostly in national parks, that don't seem to have any clear explanation. The term was actually coined by David Paulides, a former law enforcement officer who started to investigate these cases. His research uncovered a pattern: people, often children or hikers, vanishing under strange circumstances, sometimes without leaving a trace. And the baffling part is many of these disappearances have no evidence of foul play, no sign of struggle, and no explanation. Not unlike that Zygmunt Adamski case we did early on. Some of these cases are really eerie. I think we've talked about doing a whole Missing 411 episode someday, right? Yeah.
Did you ever watch the documentary? I watched it and it's really creepy. But then I also heard, and I didn't look into it much more yet, but I remember hearing some critical people saying that it's exaggerated and leaving out some parts, and I don't know. I really have to look up, but it's eerie. It's definitely eerie.
Yeah, some of the cases are super creepy. And there are situations where people are literally a few feet away from someone when they're just gone.
Yeah, hiking, for example, just turning the corner and
they're gone. Bobcats. Big cats is the only thing that makes sense there.
Yeah.
I was horrified. Our friend Christine stayed with us from Colorado recently. And we were talking about the very healthy coyote pack in our backyard. And she was saying that out in Colorado, the thing that's been absolutely scary for her is there are mountain lions. And the neighbor's German Shepherd was grabbed, jumped a 6-foot fence, gone. Mountain lion. So that's when I say mountain lion. Like, I'm not trying to be silly and be like mountain lions, but like, the only thing that really, I don't think it's Bigfoot. I don't necessarily think it's aliens, but you do wonder about areas where there could potentially be big cats. Because if a cat jumped down, grabbed you, and took off into a tree, your neck would be broken and your windpipe would be cut. Yeah. You wouldn't even be able to scream. The upside of big cat attack is it would be over real quick. You'd feel like they'd have found something.
The other thing I'm often thinking is falling into some hole in the ground that nobody can see, that you miss completely. Things like this.
Yes, a well, a crevasse. You just...
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Really.
You think that could have happened to Christopher? Like, for example, he really had to pee, stepped away, fell into whatever, and nobody ever found him?
I think that's possible. Or he stepped off to pee, but no, an animal attack they'd have found. I don't know, because you feel like if they searched the area, how far would he have gone to pee? He wouldn't have gone that far, you know? No. You just want to step off the trail for a little privacy and make sure you're not going to step in your own pee later.
The boots?
Yeah, I don't like it.
The boot on the barbed wire? Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
I don't like any of it. Nope. No, this is it. And so Christopher's disappearance definitely fits this missing 411, like, criteria. Like, how did he go missing that quickly? What's even weirder is that many of the cases have been brushed off, and in some instances, the names of people involved are kept hidden, which I think because we don't know who the coworkers were, there's some feelings that could be part of it. And some people believe that there could be something supernatural, like UFOs. Others think it's just a mix of bad luck and unpredictable wilderness hazards. I don't know, but Christopher's disappearance is really, like, he's just gone. If you are out there listening and you have any information about the disappearance of Christopher, please contact the Harris County Sheriff's Office. Their number is 706-628-4211. The reference agency case number is 020-12-5004, and the NCIC case number is M-082-152-620, or contact your local authorities. Let's see, we have some information from the Charlie Project. Christopher has been missing since January 25th, 2002 from Harris County, Georgia. When he went missing, he was 20. Today, he would be 42 years old. When he went missing, he was between 5'7" and 5'9" and around 130 pounds. It's probably safe to say that he is a black man in the neighborhood of 5'8", 5'9", and probably closer to 150. He was last seen wearing a black shirt, a blue and gray plaid jacket with a gray hood, navy blue Dickie work pants, tan FUBU work boots, a black skull cap, and a black watch. He is described as an African-American male with black hair, brown eyes. His hair was braided at the time of his disappearance in January 2002. He may have a mustache, beard, or goatee. He has a tattoo on his right arm of an ice cream cone with his nickname Chris written in vertical letters inside the design. And then the ice cream part of the tattoo is the head of a joker wearing a hat.
That's a very, very good, it's a good description, but it's also a very distinguishable feature.
Yes, it's not just like a heart with mom in it. Or Tweety Bird on your lower back.
It's disheartening. Like, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of these cases that we could talk about. And I don't know, maybe we can do episodes like this once in a while. Also, if you want to listen to podcasts that mostly focus on missing person cases or cold cases in general, I can highly, highly recommend The Trail Went Cold or True Crime Garage.
Mm-hmm. Also, Someone Knows Something.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of those seasons are gripping. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, those are 3 cases. Again, we featured young men this time. We'll be doing different kind of episodes like this from time to time, hopefully, if you liked it. It's just, I think it's satisfying to talk about some of these cases where we don't have that same huge amount of info like we did with Aisha Degree or Aaron Gillen.
Madeleine McCann.
McCann. Yeah, some of the cases you've got so much information. Some of them we don't have as much, but they are still worth talking about so we can remember these young men and hopefully someday get some answers for their families.
You've got something good.
I just returned from a really nice trip with my husband. Our listeners might remember back in May, we took our niece and nephew on a cruise to Bermuda. So on that cruise, my husband Paul played in a poker tournament with my brother-in-law on a sea day. And he won the tournament. And so the prize was an inside stateroom and entry into the 2024 Poker Challenge. And that's like a big tournament. It's a chartered cruise. And it's like $1,200 to play in the tournament. So that is what he won. He won the buy-in and the cabin. So that was back in June. And so when he won that, we were like, oh, well, it's over our anniversary. Great. And we were able to upgrade to a balcony stateroom it was like $1,000 for the 2 of us for a week's cruise, including everything but gratuities. So for us, that felt like, how are you going to do anything for $500 a person for a week, right? Like everything included. So it just felt like a really good deal. It was great. It was just the 2 of us. The weather was not great. It was lots of thunderstorms. So we didn't really get off the ship much, but it was very relaxing. And I loved being in a ship at sea in a thunderstorm.
That sounds so cool. And Paul did well, I think, right?
Yeah, he did. He placed in the money. He always wants to win. He did not win. But he won enough to totally cover the cost of the cruise that we just did and to pay for the next one because he's also won an entry in the 2025 poker cruise. So, that's great. So also shout out to my friend April, who is in our Facebook group. So I met her the last time this happened, and we did a poker cruise because Paul had won a cruise on a different cruise. That had happened right around when we started the podcast. And so we sort of became friends, and she was telling me how she likes true crime. And I was like, please, listen to us. We just started the show, and had no idea that, because she hadn't posted anything online, and I hadn't really posted anything leading up to it. And it just occurred to me. And so I just messaged her on the cruise, like the day before the last day of the cruise. And I was like, are you on this cruise? And she was like, I am. Don't tell me you are. So That was pretty funny. Next year, I'm going to be better about it, April. We're going to spend more time together. And if there are any other poker-playing hellions, maybe I'll see you guys next year on this cruise too. Yeah, I just read a lot. I slept a lot because I'm by myself a lot. Paul's off playing poker.
I think it's amazing. And I'm glad
but it was good. He had a great time. I'm so happy that he had a good time. Yeah. How about you? How was your trip?
So while you were traveling, I was traveling at the same time. I was visiting my husband, and it was amazing. We had 4 days, lovely hotel, and it's so nice. Like, I love it when he comes home, but it was so nice to have like a vacation together, because when he's here, it's still, we have the dogs, we get up in the morning, we walk the dogs, there's housework and chores and, all this stuff. And this was just vacation, and we got up late and we walked to the city center and we had nice breakfast and we ate so much. I was scared to step on the scale when I got back home, but it was worth it. And while I was gone, my mom was so sweet and she stayed in our house because of Jam's condition. It's so stressful for him if he's out of the house. So she said she's gonna come here and take care of them here, so he doesn't get disrupted too much in his day-to-day routine. And my aunt came, her sister, and they spent the days here. And when I came home, everything was cleaned and the bed had fresh sheets on it and the fire was in the stove, and I just could, take a shower and go to bed. I love my mom.
That's the best. I'm so glad. That's so nice. Yeah, we really needed a little downtime with our husbands.
Yeah,
it was good.
Definitely. It was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it for this week. Next week is going to be a deep dive historical true crime case. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, please go to your podcast app, leave us a rating and or review. It's really important to us. Contact us via freshhellpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget Patreon get-together 11th of November. What else? I think that's it. Join our Facebook group. That's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have a Facebook group and we have a Facebook page. So if you just want to stay up to date on happenings and new episodes, you can join the page, but not involve in the chit chat. It's not a dedicated murder page per se. There is a lot of the only thing you will not find us discussing is politics.
That's strict no. There's so many places out there on the World Wide Web to discuss politics. Doesn't have to saturate every corner.
We're not talking about it. No.
I think murder is actually the smallest part we talk about in the Facebook group.
Probably. Yeah, old houses, jewelry, fashion, travel, animals. Yeah. We talk about a lot of stuff.
Speaking of animals, tell your pets we said hi, hug them, cuddle them, kiss them, take them to the vet, treat them kindly. Be kind to your fellow human beings. The most important part of it all, be kind to yourself.
And if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.